Thank you very much for joining me today, Jamie.
Pleasure.
It's a pleasure. Um, it was great. I met you about a year ago at your workshop, Intimacy.
What about intimacy?
What about Intimacy? And although I knew you from the band Faithless back in the 90s, big fan, I hadn't experienced you within that context. And that weekend workshop about a year ago now was really amazing. Really, really amazing.
Great.
So that's why I wanted to just have a quick chat with you today, just to hear more about your ideas on relationships and more workshops that you're going to be running, certainly up in Chester.
Super.
Yeah. So I'd just like to hear your thoughts on going back to what about intimacy. What what do you think women need to learn, and what do you think men need to learn in relationships?
Well, I think it's the same for everybody,
Yeah.
which is, as much as you can dare to stop hiding,
Mm,
as much as you can be really visible in who you really are, not the version of you that your friends or mother told you should be,
mm,
or some glossy magazine. The more we show up as really who we are, the more chance the person opposite us has to care for us
mm,
and to really meet us deeply. A lot of us are, complaining about not having enough depth, not having enough true core, intimate meeting and joining in our relationships. But we don't often make it easy for the other person when
mm,
we're only presenting the brochure of ourselves or the safe bit. And the less vulnerable we are,
mm,
the more we play it safe, the less chance we give everyone else to meet us at the level of depth that we want to be met. So, the first thing above all is to find someone who you dare to risk being that extra bit vulnerable with. And
mm,
vulnerable doesn't mean sobbing and begging, and vulnerable doesn't have to be. It can be vulnerable to stand up in your power and say, "I want
mm.
this.
Yeah.
I deserve
Mm,
this."
mm,
It could be vulnerable to share things that you don't know are always going to be received.
mm,
You have to risk rejection sometimes,
mm,
but it's better to be rejected for who you are than kept around for who you're not.
mm. Yeah, very true. Yeah, because that's going to create false relationships and you feel empty inside. That's been my experience anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's wonderful that you say about showing your vulnerability, showing who you are. But how do you do that?
It's not so much how you do it as how you
Hmm.
stop not doing it.
Okay, so tell me about that.
Just um, just being yourself is the most natural thing in the world.
Hmm.
Uh, and when it starts feeling edgy, or you start hiding, or manipulating, or persuading, or defending,
Hmm.
you're in the way of the intimacy. Your
Hmm.
preconceptions about how you want to be heard or how you want to be seen, your fears about what might happen if they really knew the truth.
Hmm. Hmm.
Um, so stop being governed by that. We know what fear feels like in our body.
Hmm.
And so I think the biggest tool anyone can learn for intimacy is to have an intimacy with the own inside of your body,
Hmm.
with what it feels like on a sensory level being you.
Hmm.
And if you're doing a daily practice where you're sending a radar through the inside of your body and looking for blocks and numb bits and strong bits and shaky bits,
Hmm.
if you're doing that for at least, 10 minutes while the kettle's boiling in the morning,
Yeah.
you become used to knowing what you feel like.
Hmm.
And without that, you can't really have intimacy because you can't know how you feel. And if you don't know how you feel, you don't know what you need.
Hmm.
If you don't know what you need, you can't ask for what you need or
Hmm.
give yourself what you need. So it all
Hmm.
comes back down to feeling yourself, the intimacy enough with yourself to
Hmm.
know, oh, I feel like this. I feel edgy today. I feel exhausted today. I
Hmm.
feel full of beans today. I want to
Hmm.
share my juicy sexiness today. Oh, I don't want to today. I want to just be by myself.
Hmm.
If you need to be by yourself, giving yourself that, having
Hmm.
a hot bath or sitting under a tree or just chilling out is the best thing, most self-loving thing you can do. But if you didn't really check in with yourself and ask, how do I feel?
Hmm.
What do I need? Then you're not going to know. Therefore, you're not going to give yourself what you need. You might show up for something in a crowded place or with other people that feels too raw to be around today, and then you've railroaded your own boundaries, inevitably that's going to end up with an argument with someone, or a falling out, or a feeling of alienation. And at the end of the day, when you're tired and feeling lonely, you go, oh, why is my life like this? Well, usually because you didn't listen to how you felt, and you went straight ahead somewhere, or doing something that you could have avoided if you had been intimate enough with yourself at the beginning of the day to know really how you felt today, and to be the number one advocate for looking after you and your own feelings and your own needs.
So how have you found that actually being in relationship? Have you found it to be a struggle? Do you find it easier now with this practice?
Easier,
Mm,
absolutely.
mm,
You know, my boundaries are my boundaries. They don't have to be the same as everybody else's boundaries.
mm,
But if I'm with someone and they don't, my boundaries are too much of a cage for them, or their boundaries are too much of a cage for me,
mm,
then that's never going to feel good for anybody. But at least if I show up and say, hey, look, this is what I need, A, B, and
mm,
C.
mm,
You don't have to agree with it. You don't have to say that it fits with whatever. But you know, if that effortlessly fits with how you'd like to live your life, we're a fit.
mm,
If it doesn't, and you're having to compensate or be a horny celibate to be with me, um, then that's eventually going to crash.
mm,
So it's good to pick someone who fits with your boundaries, not who has to agree them and stick to them. You know, if you need to
mm.
agree boundaries, that's already a red flag for me.
Oh, can you say a bit more about that? That's intriguing.
If I have to get you to agree to something
Mm,
for me to feel okay, and you weren't going to do that anyway,
mm,
then if you have to agree it, then it's likely you're going to be holding something back
mm,
in order to fit in with me.
mm.
And eventually, that's going to be something that feels unfulfilling for you.
Yeah.
So really, I want the boundaries for whoever's with me to be something that they were going to do anyway.
Mm,
If they need to adjust, adapt, edit themselves to
mm,
fit in with my needs,
mm,
that probably won't have a very long shelf life.
mm. But isn't that also part of learning about the other person and adapting and changing and figuring things out, that adaptation is a part of it?
I only think adaptation should be a part of it if it's adapting to make you happy, not to make the other
Mm,
person happy.
okay.
If maybe you've been in polyamorous relationships, and the person you're with goes, actually, I want to be in a monogamous relationship. Yes, you can adapt to them,
Mm,
but only if you yourself have reached a stage in your life when you go, you know what, I've done this polyamory thing, it hasn't really brought me fulfillment.
mm,
I think I'd be happier in a one-on-one situation for me.
mm,
Oh,
mm,
great, let's adapt, let's do that. But only for me, not, okay, I will do my best to not look at other women and not be,
mm,
eventually one woman's going to come along when you and me are having a difficult time, and it's going to seem really attractive, and something will go on or it won't,
mm,
but I'll resent it, or I will be suppressing myself in some way, which will kill the sexuality between you and me. As I said, if I wasn't naturally going to do that anyway, then that's going to, in some way, start becoming a numbing force between us.
mm,
So I don't think you should adapt to people unless that's how you want to be anyway. Don't do it for them.
mm, mm, mm. It makes me wonder then, how does someone decide to be committed to someone? I guess the idea of marriage, is that completely dead, do you think? Or
I don't think it's connected. I think, as I said, if you're
mm,
with someone and how they naturally want to live
mm,
is a fit with how you naturally want to live, good to have that conversation early on,
mm,
and then you can go all the way. But there's no point if I hate kids and you love kids
mm.
and want kids, or I have to live in a hot country, but you've got to be near your mother in Neasden. Like the basics, how we want to live, where we want to live,
Yeah.
basics have got to be an effortless fit.
Hmm.
Otherwise, you're gonna, compromise is always gonna have a short shelf life.
Hmm. Hmm. I like that effortless fit. I like that. I
Doesn't mean
like
there
it.
can't be any give and take, obviously,
Yeah.
but
Mm,
the general headlines have got to be an effortless fit.
Yeah, I totally agree. I totally agree.
The cornerstones.
Mm, mm. So, what would you say to um, women who are struggling to get into relationships?
Do more yoga.
Ah, God. Tell me more.
I don't know. You know, it has happened that it does seem that women have been on a slightly accelerated journey of consciousness
Hmm.
more than the men. Um,
Could you say a bit more about that, Jamie?
Women are a bit braver about because women are brought up where it's not such a taboo to look vulnerable,
Hmm.
not such a taboo to go into the deep emotional yucky stuff. It's more expected.
Hmm.
Men have been brought up for the most part. I'm talking in generalities here, but you
Yeah.
know, statistically, men have not been so supported in being emotional and yucky and having all their stuff come up. So it's been a slower
Hmm.
journey for them to
Hmm.
expose themselves to the workshops and teachings and environments where they start clearing it out and becoming wiser and more self-caring and self-loving and
Hmm.
vulnerable. Women have got the edge because they haven't been brought up to think that that's a taboo, whereas
Hmm.
for many men it's a taboo.
Hmm.
So men need a lot more support than women to come out of the shell
Hmm.
and risk the vulnerability. Just culturally, it's been very ingrained that it's not as acceptable for men as it is for women.
Hmm. Hmm. Hmm.
So women, if you hang out in environments, I say yoga, you know, workshops, places where people are seeking consciousness, you're going to have a high percentage of meeting a guy who's into that stuff
Yeah.
and who's going to be
Hmm.
able to meet you there.
Hmm.
But at the same time, I think it's important to support the men not just in the awakening of their inner feminine, where they
Hmm.
can talk about their feelings and play with their kids, and but also I think it's a time now for not just the inner feminine to be deeply awoken, but the core masculine.
Hmm. Hmm.
Men have been obviously because of our toxic, sexually incontinent forefathers. We carry a lot of the burden of men are like this,
Hmm.
and a lot of the ways men have controlled, dominated, and hurt women
Hmm.
is carried by this generation of men, even though they may themselves not have done any of that.
Yeah.
They still carry the backlash, a bit like you know the grandchildren of the Nazis or whatever in Germany.
Hmm.
You know, they still were Germans, and they still, you know, they still had to sort of carry that ancestral shame.
Yeah.
So men need a lot of support to come forward in their leadership. The ones which want to lead through service and generosity and protection,
Hmm.
instead of just tarring them with the brush of our men are like this
Hmm.
and making them have to catch up.
Hmm.
It would be good to draw a line under it and go, okay, I accept this generation of men. You were not part of that. I'm not
Hmm.
going to keep blaming you for what your father did.
Yeah.
I'm going to give you a totally clean sheet and
Hmm.
trust your leadership could come from service and love. And that distrust is in the way of what women want.
Hmm.
And it's an understandable distrust because of what
Hmm.
ancestrally has been going on, but it's not giving the women what they want.
Hmm.
And I would just drop all self righteousness and leap into the trusting field that the new men can meet you.
Hmm.
And if you don't do that, don't complain
Hmm.
that you're not meeting the right men because it's quite a challenge to be a man in a modern day relationship of vulnerability and authenticity.
Hmm.
To have to do that with all our programming
Hmm.
is a jump, is a leap. To do it with all
Hmm.
the programming and you kind of waiting for us to fail because of what our fathers and grandfathers were like is making it
Hmm.
even harder.
Hmm.
So be all about supporting the men
Hmm.
instead of prejudging them.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah. Wow. Wow. And so when you talk about on your workshop, you spoke about the polarity of the masculine and the feminine. So how would you define the masculine then?
Well, it doesn't have to be just in the man, the masculine, you know.
Hmm.
Like David Data says, you know, there have to be a ravisher and a ravishee,
Okay.
but it doesn't mean that the person doing the ravishing has to always be the man.
Hmm. Yes.
Um,
Hmm.
but someone has to.
Hmm.
And generally, the way I look at it is the masculine principle is the one that goes out into the world, that does stuff, that penetrates, and the feminine is the one that receives and listens and is impacted.
Mm. Mm.
But I want to be impacted by you. I want to receive you. I want my feminine to be able to drop into space so that you can expand into me and penetrate me with your wisdom and your juiciness
Mm.
sometimes. And other times I want to be able to expand into you and I want you to yield.
Mm.
So I think it's really good for men and women to sit opposite each other and just have a little bit of a practice at that. I'll
Yeah.
go soft and you take your energy into me. Even if we're not touching each other, sit opposite each other, just feel what it feels like to just send yourself into me and I'll just really feel you. And then after a couple of minutes, I'll send myself into you and you feel what my essence feels like.
Mm.
And we can just practice going back and forth like that, just to
Mm.
get used to the seesaw, the to and fro, and be
Mm.
willing to both be both sometimes.
Yeah. Yeah. Both giving and receiving. Yeah. Yeah. I love that. I love
Yeah.
that. So for anyone who hasn't attended your intimacy workshop, what would you say to them? Because for me, it was a wonderful experience. It was a
I
wonderful
think the
experience.
deepest relationship is with ourselves.
Mm.
And when we really are willing to show up as us and even admit to ourselves who we are and what we want, then we've got an opportunity to manifest that everywhere else. But
Mm.
while we're hiding from everyone, including ourselves, and feeling ashamed that we want this or feeling that we don't deserve that, it's very hard for the external to come and meet us.
Yeah.
We are the ceiling of what's going to come near us, our own beliefs,
Mm.
limitations.
Mm.
So, in whatever way you can, to start looking into where do you feel ashamed, where do you feel like you want to hide even from yourself. If you can start to even show up for yourself is who you are and go,
Mm.
actually, what I really want is this. I don't know if I deserve it.
Mm.
I don't know if I should have it or anyone else should give it to me, but my truth is really deep down, this is what I want, my heart's desire. If you can admit that to yourself, that's
Mm.
halfway towards getting it.
Mm. Mm. Fantastic. Mm.
I'm in Chester next weekend, actually.
Yeah, so tell me more about that. What is it you're doing in
Doing the
Chester?
Transforming Shadows weekend next week, which is, each of us has so many different parts of ourselves we shut down and different parts we hear inside our heads, but we don't let people see. We've
Mm.
got a million characters that live in our heads,
Mm.
which are kind of in the way
Mm.
of the free flow of life. We've each got inside us an inner critic.
Mm.
We've got a slave driver.
Mm.
We've got an innocent victim.
Mm.
We've got a naive child. We've got a vengeful murderer. We've got a flaming sex maniac. They're all in there.
The mental patient, I think I've heard you say
Yeah.
that. Yeah.
Usually we hide them all away and are just sort of spinning plates, just managing them,
Yeah. Yeah.
But there's a lot more juice to be had from not just managing them, but from meeting them in a really juicy, empowered way and actually turning them into employees
Mm.
and getting them all on board, all aligned, all working for the same team.
Mm.
That's what we do on Transforming Shadows is we sort of go in
Mm.
and get them all on board. And so that all parts of ourselves are working towards the same thing. And then we're very powerful and very creative and very
Mm.
sexy.
Fantastic. So that's a weekend workshop. This one's up
Yeah.
in Chester.
It's in Chester on the 2nd and 3rd of April. You can get the link at jamiecatto.com
Okay,
to go there,
fabulous.
to Eventbrite and get the tickets.
Fabulous. And
Gonna
you
see you
went,
there.
I'm hoping to come. Yeah, I am
Great.
actually.
Be
Yeah.
great to have you.
So thank you for just giving me your time. It's been wonderful talking to you. I know you're not
Pleasure.
feeling too well, so I appreciate that.
Sweet.
Yeah. All
See you
right
next
then. Take
weekend.
care then. Bye
Bye, love.
bye.